Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. Our next letter comes from Leanne. Leanne writes, on the 15th of January 2024, completely out of the blue, my second husband told me he didn't love me anymore and he didn't want to try and save our relationship. This came 3 weeks before my son's 16th birthday, 7 weeks before I turned 50, and during my son's exam year. There hadn't been any conversations about him being dissatisfied or unhappy prior to this announcement. There was no conversations about him being dissatisfied or unhappy prior to this announcement. There were no his Christmas card said how much he loved me. I could not believe what he was doing. And there was also no sign over the Christmas period of any of this. And everyone I knew was utterly shocked. I couldn't believe what he was doing and initially tried to reason with him, asking him to learn about how marriages go through ups and downs, but it's quite possible to get the good times back. He absolutely stonewalled me and refused to consider counseling. He gave me a stupid excuse for ending our relationship, saying that there were no pictures of him up in the house, which is not true, and that we wanted different things. He said that there was too much negativity in the way we talked about our families, who are both difficult. He painted himself as a people pleaser and a positive person. I'm going to say right now, Leanne, that is neither of those true. Well, one of those is true, the other one not so much. At one point, he said that he really loved me and my son, but he loved himself more. He kept going away for weeks to his brother's house until I asked him to leave for good in March 2024. During his first absence, my mother became seriously ill, and I had to travel back and forth to the hospital and look after my son at the same time. He did not come back to help. Since then, he's behaved appallingly. He blocked me on social media with no warning and similarly applied for a divorce without telling me. He insisted we get the house valued and wants to take everything he can from me financially, including my pension, without fully disclosing his own finances. This whole experience has been the worst of my life. I've been physically and psychologically ill. Yeah, I bet you have. I still can't eat or sleep, and for months I had a permanently upset stomach. I've lost a significant amount of weight. I had to take 3 months off work. My son has been suffering a lot in the last weeks too, but at 16 is unwilling to talk about it or go to counseling. Okay, Leanne, I want to take a pause here. We're already one paragraph in and you've already gone through a fucking shit ton of just monstrous shit. This is beyond appalling. I'm so sorry that you've gone through this. And I'm actually really glad you've written in about this, because this is not the first time I've heard of an avoidant attacher blowing up a marriage out of nowhere when everything was seemingly okay. And some of the stuff your husband, presumably now ex-husband, has been saying is utter bullshit. You know, as you correctly identified, you have pictures of him in the home, so that's a bullshit excuse of There are just no photos of us in the home. That's right up there with you like mountain hiking and I like mountain climbing. We both want different things in life. It's like, oh, shut the fuck up. Like, this is relationship OCD working on overtime. But this guy is an avoidant on steroids. Like, to me, I'm getting dismissive avoidant vibes already. And I'm sure I'm going to hear more about this, or maybe not. Maybe you've dated someone else since then and you're going to tell me more about it. But regardless, I'm so sorry you've had this. This is disgusting behavior. And your poor son. I mean, I gotta tell you, exam time. I mean, I'm sure you remember this too, Leanne, when you were probably doing exams. Exam time is bloody stressful. And it sounds to me like this is all leading up to Christmas, before your 50th, big milestones, right? Holiday season, stressful time for your son. You're about to turn 50, which is a huge milestone for a lot of people. And so, isn't it fascinating that it just all ends around this time? I suspect what was probably going on was he was feeling a lot of stress. He couldn't handle it anymore, and he decided to end it abruptly. But oh, the way he's done it, brutal, brutal. And he's not even involving you with like the financing and just making all the decisions. Like, we're gonna sell the home, we need to value it. We're going through a divorce. Like, fuck him. Seriously, fuck him for doing this, especially in light of the fact that he'd sent you such a lovely Christmas card signifying that everything was hunky dory. This is disgusting behavior. People pleasing is a funny thing. I don't actually think people pleasing in its basic form, meaning being good to others, being kind, generous, approachable, agreeable. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But this is a great example of people pleasing that's very dark, where it combines, inauthenticity and, to a degree, a bit of lying, because there's no truth in what's going on in this particular example of people pleasing. I want to make it clear. I don't think people who people please are necessarily manipulative. And I think we need to understand what kind of people pleasing we're dealing with. This is a great example of awful, abusive people pleasing, right? Because he's obviously held on to a lot of resentments for a while without telling you. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're superficial resentments and they're pathetic, but still valid, just the way he's gone about it, not okay. Because, feelings can be valid. However, the stories we create about it may not necessarily be so. And I feel as though this is a great example of showing how he's telling you one thing, giving you the indicator that everything's okay, when clearly he's not okay. And he's just destroyed this relationship. I'm so sorry you're going through this, Leanne. This is fucked up on so many levels. So usually these letters start with a bit of a wind up to these experiences, and you've taken us straight to the plot twist within the first, paragraph. So I'm kind of curious what the remainder of your letter's about. I wonder what's going to happen. I just do not understand how someone you trusted unconditionally can switch overnight from being loving and apparently committed to you to causing you more pain than you ever thought possible. I don't want to ever get married again, and I'll find it incredibly hard to trust anyone in the future. I'd really like to get your view on this behavior and the possible effects on him from his childhood. I'm guessing he's very damaged and has adopted a dismissive avoidant attachment style. You got that right, and I haven't read this in advance. As a lot of you will know, I usually read these on the fly. My team members will usually read this ahead of time, but and that's when we're collaborating, of course. But for me, I often go in blind, just reading it as I go, because I prefer to keep my reaction raw and just to sort of suss out what's going on based on, the writing and what the person's saying. And it seems like Leanne and I are on the same page. Anyways, I'm guessing he's very damaged and has adopted a dismissive avoidant attachment style, which is why he's been able to rip our lives apart so brutally. I'm going to take that up a notch. I actually think there might be something else going on here, because someone being dismissive avoidant is one thing, but I think so when I say someone is a severe avoidant attacher, whether that be fearful or dismissive, we are entering into the realm of degrees of narcissism, for sure. Selfishness, exploitativeness, lying, manipulation, control of intimacy, abusive behavior, right? Not every avoidant attacher does this. And it doesn't mean that these people necessarily have a personality disorder, but there is a higher chance of them having a personality disorder. The reason I like using the attachment stuff to understand the behavior is because it makes it so much easier to be like, oh yeah, there's a fear of intimacy going on here, and you can sort of work your way up from there. It's easier, in my opinion, to work with the clues that are obvious and then find out some of the things where it's like, there seems to be something more going on here than just dismissive avoidance. Anyways, my insight into that aside, I'm keen to hear more stuff. Okay, so in 2008, my first husband left me when our son was only 7 weeks old. He'd been having an affair with a work colleague. I was utterly devastated, having lost the love of my life, and was literally left holding the baby. I was isolated as well as brokenhearted. I wanted more than anything for us to stay together, and he sprung me along for over a year, saying he'd come back when he got his head straight. Eventually, it became clear he had no intention of ever coming back to us. He married the other woman shortly after we were divorced. Ah, so your first husband sounds like an avoidant attacher as well, too. Anytime I hear an avoidant saying, I need to get my head straight, I need to go to therapy, I need to work on myself, I'm just not able to work on sorry, I'm not able to give you what you need right now because I don't want to drag you through the pain of what I'm going through right now. We've got themes of learned helplessness, depression, and interestingly enough, despite the fact that they claim that they want to work on themselves, a lot of them will not work on themselves because it's too confronting for them. And they feel like they don't know, they don't actually have the willingness to go to the next step and actually work on it. I find a lot of these individuals in the severe end will do the adjacent stuff, the ayahuasca retreats, the acupuncture, the hypnotherapy, which, by the way, are not necessarily bad for some people in certain contexts, but it's not ever going to be the cure-all and the fix for a lot of people where they need much more intensive somatic intensive therapy. So yeah, already I'm getting themes for you that you've dated people who are liars, people who have betrayed you. And Leanne, I got to tell you, this is making me think, have you experienced betrayal from your upbringing as well too, where people have strung you along, have made you feel, good only to sort of take things away from you down the line as well too. Or people who've shown up, appearing quite glossy, impressive, charming, only to be very, emotionally unavailable and also causing you a lot of grief because this stuff can happen. If not, you are truly very unlucky and it's not fair that you've had to go through this. But anyways, let's continue. At the time I met my second husband, I was still extremely fragile, vulnerable, and sad. Can I just say here for a bit of context? That is always a recipe for meeting people who are, just not good for us. When we're sad, vulnerable, and fragile, we have a far higher chance to work, to get with people who are not necessarily, let's just say, secure in their internal world. We met while I was on holiday with a friend around 20 months after my first husband left me. After this, he pursued me very hard. I guess it is what is known as love bombing, although I didn't realize it at the time. Fair enough. He would send multiple messages every day and come to see me on a regular basis. We lived around 150 miles apart at the time. So there's a bit of distance. He surprised me with concert tickets and presents. Looking back, I was just so grateful to have something I saw as good in my life, and I was glad not to be lonely all the time. He introduced me to his parents soon after we met. I was very surprised the next time I went to their house to discover he had taken photos of my son and framed them at his mum's request. I thought it was a bit presumptuous, weird, and definitely overstepped a boundary, but it was explained away by saying his mum loves kids and was very keen to have them. We're going to take a pause here. That is a weird thing to have. Like if I ever dated a guy, let's just say I was a single dad, which I'm not, but if I had a guy take a photo of my kid because their mum thought it was, cute, I'd be like, fuck off. On the basis that if I didn't know them very well, and it was only a few months into dating, I'd be like, no, get your mum out of this. Already I'm getting enmeshment vibes, a bit of emo incest or emotional incest. And I also feel like there's, a lot of intensity from this guy. So there is some stuff here which is not great, but I can understand. Look, to your credit, Leanne, you're obviously feeling quite heartbroken, devastated, and betrayed off the back of your first husband. So I could understand you being particularly vulnerable off the back of this. And you said something before, which was really quite interesting, which was the feeling of loneliness you had too. I want to take a moment here to say to people, loneliness is a hallmark symptom of emotional neglect. Whenever I hear someone say, I'm lonely, I just want to be with someone, usually they're thinking that a partner will resolve this. It's not necessarily going to. People need to work on becoming more emotionally connected to themselves and having people who are emotionally available as well, usually best to be done with friends. Because usually a lot of that loneliness we feel is not because we don't have people physically around us, it's because we're feeling deeply disconnected. So, not saying that necessarily applies to you, Leanne, but I got to tell you, it's really important to think about that because we need to fill our own cup up with people who can validate and also treat us well and be emotionally available. It's a bit of think of it as also a form of protection against some of these clowns that are out there as well, too. It's not a silver bullet, but it certainly is really important because it helps remind you of also about being validated, being reassured, kind of like when you see a therapist and they're, hopefully supportive and validating within reason, and also holding you accountable where it's appropriate. Anyways, let's continue. My ex had an 11-year-old daughter who lived with her mum. So he knew what it was like to have a child and seemed to embrace being with my son. Over the next couple of years, we grew serious about our relationship, and it was clear that he wanted to make it long term. There were red flags which I brushed off, such as his deep-rooted fear of displeasing his mum. Hey, I told you there was enmeshment. She was incredibly overbearing and dictatorial, demanding things were done on her terms and when she wanted, having no consideration for the stresses of me being a busy mum, especially considering I'm a hospital doctor. She ruined social occasions by asking inappropriate questions, overstepping boundaries, placing demands, etc., which I couldn't tolerate in silence. She also has a major psychotic disorder, which was kept in secret from me for years. Unfortunately, my recent ex, the second husband's loyalty to her is pathological. Yeah, it sounds like it. Hello, enmeshment. Hello, codependency. Hello, emo incest. I believe I believe this is the root of the destruction of our marriage. Yes and no, but we'll talk more about that later. As well as the breakup of his relationship from his daughter's mother. It seems to me that my ex was made responsible for his mother's well-being from being a young child and was emotionally neglected. Got that right. It's ingrained that he should always please her, and it causes him overwhelming fear, guilt, and anxiety if he doesn't. My ex's brother is similarly damaged, but it manifests differently. He's angry, occasionally violent, lacks empathy, and is uncomfortable in his own skin. My ex is also clearly frightened of him, presumably due to an angry, violent outburst in the past. My ex's father was also absent for long periods during their childhood working abroad. Okay, so this is such a good descriptor you've given me, Leanne. I want to make it clear, this is a tale as old as time. And I'm going to be using this as a stereotype. So please understand, I am not coming at this from a place of, being sexist, gendered when I say this. It's just a trope that I see a lot with insecure attachments. Having the distant, emotionally unavailable dad, usually with a dismissive, avoidant attachment style, and having the very emotionally overbearing, emotionally dysregulated mum, usually who has an anxious attachment and might even have some other personality issue going on too. Why does this couple seem to be the pairing that's as old as time? Because the dismissive avoidant will often get with this person because they're looking to be needed. It is their self-sabotage because they get with someone who's not giving them true intimacy and they just get to do whatever they want to do. And for the poor person, who's on the receiving end of this, they may then turn to their children to try and get their emotional needs met, or they'll cheat. But this is such a common pairing and is often the basis for a lot of generational trauma. So very interesting stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if your ex also doesn't do well with men. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he has not only clear father wounds that translate to him being kind of, timid and also a bit passive with other guys. But I also suspect too that, due to his enmeshment, he gets on very well with women in a very sycophantic way from time to time. Just a hunch. I had many conversations with my ex about the difficulties around his family's behavior. They had a culture of keeping secrets about his mum to keep the peace. Ex once told his daughter to withhold information from her own mum after she became very upset at something her nan, which is the ex's mum, had said to her. I couldn't believe he prioritized his mum over his daughter's well-being. None of the family showed any logic or good judgment over the time I knew them. There was little kindness or genuine interest from any of the family in me or my son. Ex's sister-in-law once took my son's Christmas present off him. Jesus. Because he was shy about opening it in front of everyone. I have a fairly pragmatic view of relationships. I value companionship, kindness, and friendship. I realize that midlife is mostly a grind and moments of real happiness are a bonus. I felt that overall our being together was a good thing, although we were worlds apart in terms of our education and emotional intelligence. We liked each other's company and got on well when we had downtime. We laughed a lot. We enjoyed going on nice holidays and visiting galleries, going to concerts and on days out. We were members of a boot camp together. I did find it annoying that he could be immature and selfish. He'd make childish jokes inappropriately at times of tension and couldn't see that that was hard to deal with. He'd also take the piss out of me sometimes, which again was a horrible thing to do with your partner. He was often economical with the truth and was not open about his income or finances. Okay, we're going to take a pause here. I find a lot of dismissive avoidance who are on the severe end. Again, withhold, but also in their withholding, withhold access to resources and also involve you in that. They're often terrible with money too. Even if they hoard a lot of money, they'll often get into like really dodgy gambling problems. They'll often overspend on things. Their addictions will probably be the things that they spend a lot of their money on. They tend to be very controlling of your money if you have integrated finances. And it can be really problematic for you because you can often feel like, you're working, you're relating to a banker rather than a partner. The kids will feel that too because there's often a lot of financial control. The little annoying jokes, I imagine, did he often, I know you're not here with me, Leanne, but I could almost imagine, did he also just make some very sort of like crude, sort of sexual jokes as well from time to time? Because I could believe that was his way of probably handling the stress and trying to, diffuse his own tension and social anxiety. I imagine at times he probably would have sounded quite gregarious, but I also imagine too that he was probably the kind of guy where he would have been kind of inappropriate in the things that he said with people as well too. So yeah, that's the sort of vibe that I get. But it does sound to me like this is a guy who is very superficial in his company, meaning that sure, he's very good at like the acts of service piece, but when it comes to like depth, engagement, involving himself in you in his own life, he's not going to do that. And it does sound to me like he's terribly enmeshed with his mum, who's definitely got a vice grip on him. But I think also that's his codependency. And I think he's also benefiting from this because it probably makes him feel needed in that way too. Emotional incest is disgusting, destroys people so much. We eventually decided to get married. I loved him and was committed to our relationship. It was then that we looked without permission at my WhatsApp messages between me and my best friend discussing our decision to get engaged. She was not enthusiastic, and I wasn't under any illusions that he was the perfect man. He didn't like he didn't like what he saw and brought this up intermittently after that. I told him that if he couldn't get past it, there was no chance for us that I was worried that he couldn't accept that. He said he could put it to bed and seemed to admit that what he did was wrong and that he shouldn't have done it. I felt that he liked to know what I was doing and sang most of the time. If it was in another room with a friend, he would listen to our conversations. He had a camera doorbell and security cameras fitted on the front and back of the home. Interesting. We got married in March 2019. He spent no time with me at the wedding and didn't have sex on our short weekend honeymoon. He experienced difficulties with erectile dysfunction, but would not talk or address it. He couldn't face conversations about it, although I tried. I'm going to take a pause here. That's all anxiety. And obviously, with growing commitment, it seems like he's already starting to back away. I got two book references that people would really benefit from if they're interested. One, Men Who Can't Love by Stephen Carter. Check that out because what I'm already sensing here is a bit of stage 2 detachment. Sorry, withdrawal. Like I feel like that's what's going on here. And I'm going to dig into that in just a hot second. But another book that I read recently that I highly recommend people read, regardless of whether you're straight, gay, lesbian, man or woman, non-binary. I highly recommend people read No More Mr. Nice Guy. I can't remember the author's name, but it will definitely help you to understand a bit of what goes on when you have a man with avoidant attachment. It's mostly talking about anxious attached men, but it also talks about, avoidant men who, have all these similar sort of issues too, with erectile dysfunction and can't, be intimate with a partner. A lot of this is performance anxiety, stress. For an avoidant attacher, when they're getting close and actually have to be intimate with a partner, this can cause them tremendous resistance to being close. And it can make you feel like he may not love you. He doesn't care about you. This is your goddamn fucking wedding and honeymoon. He should be involved and interested in doing this, not backing out. So no, this is real fear of intimacy at work here. Anyways, the pandemic was extremely hard for me as a frontline hospital doctor. The ex was working at home and was clearly terrified of what might happen to him if he got COVID. Yeah, a lot of avoidants don't like the idea of getting sick because guess what happens when they get ill? They lose their freedom. They feel like no one will love them because no one want to be with them if they're sick. He didn't understand the horror of those of us working in hospital medicine who were experiencing and seemed to be more worried about himself than anyone else. His mother again behaved inappropriately by asking me to examine her genitals for a lump during the first lockdown. No, gross, disgusting. Absolutely not. I'm glad you declined. X had booked a holiday to France during the first phase of the pandemic, and at the time it was illegal to travel for leisure purposes. He was insistent that he was going to go and couldn't see how wrong that was. I put my foot down and told him it was a deal breaker. He eventually decided not to go, but he resented my stance on it, even though it was the law, and blamed me for stopping him going. I bet you anything, you stopping him from doing that would be some of the resentment that would have been brewing that led to the breakup that you described at the beginning of your letter. Because this is a guy who wants to be able to do whatever he wants to do. He wants to have freedom because he doesn't have that with his mum. He is literally projecting onto you a lot of his own shit that he has with his mum, and he's expecting he can just get away with murder, but he can't do that. And I love the fact that you said, no, you don't have to do that, because this is not only a boundary violation, but also it's illegal. You can't just fuck off to France. Anyway, X's father became ill in late 2021. Oh dear. Just for a bit of an understanding why I said, oh dear. Usually when avoidants have a loss of a caregiver or a significant person in their life, that's when they can shut down and things start to come to a grinding halt. But anyways, and by the way he was talking and with years of medical experience behind me, I realized his dad was seriously ill. I told my ex that he needed to take him to the doctor. This elicited an angry and accusatory response towards me, which was uncomfortable. I observed over the years how my ex can't stand hard situations in the face or deal with them, which is part of my everyday reality. Yeah, of course he can't, because he can't handle closure. He can't handle the difficult ins and outs of relationships. He only wants the superficialities. My ex's dad was diagnosed with cancer and died in June 2022. There was a lot of discord over that time, with his brother behaving appallingly and almost hitting his mother at one point. Shit. Throughout the illness, I tried to be as supportive as I could. For example, taking his dad to the doctor, organizing medication, visiting and chatting, explaining to his mum and making the house safer for them. I supported my ex throughout this too and looked after him when he had a panic attack. When his father died, it was me who went to confirm he was dead. His mum couldn't tell or offer comfort. As sad as it was for the ex's dad to have become ill and dead, I felt that dealing with it together had brought us closer, and I told him I was proud of him for stepping up. Yeah, something tells me that he probably felt like a piece of shit because he's not able to deal with this like you can. I bet you anything this would have added to his resentment to why he broke up with you, because you're obviously able to face a lot of this stuff head on, and he can't probably do that. And I imagine that would have probably compounded any shame he had and probably made him feel like, I can't meet this person's needs. She's so much better than me. Anyways, let's continue. His mother continued to behave in difficult ways. One example was when she turned up for 2 hours. And this was early for Sunday lunch without calling, and then flounced off saying she didn't feel welcome. This caused the ex a huge crisis, and looking back, he blamed me for it. Yeah, because he probably felt like, guilty, not worthy, not feeling good, like he didn't get love from his mum in that moment. This man is so enmeshed, it's crazy. Anyway, since his father died, responsibility for his mother lied firmly with my ex. She fell and broke her hip in October last year, and my ex was reluctant to take her to the hospital and wait the hours it was going to take to get assessed. I told him he had to do it when he suggested he take her home and just put her to bed. She was admitted for urgent surgery. I was working that day in a different hospital and couldn't do it myself. She recovered well and spent Christmas with us. I believe the trigger event prior to my husband's announcement was my unwillingness to spend New Year's Day at her house with a bunch of people I don't know. I explained why to my husband, i.e., that I was exhausted after hosting and working all Christmas, which at the time he appeared to understand. It was 2 weeks after this that he abandoned our marriage with no negotiation or willingness to work on it. He has made me feel worthless. Leanne, I am so sorry you have gone through this. This is disgusting behavior from your ex-husband. I know you reckon the mum has played a huge role in this, and don't get me wrong, she's actually a huge influence in this, but I don't think I want to place all the blame squarely on her. I think that we've also got to consider the fact too that this man has the self-esteem of a caterpillar, and it ain't turning into a butterfly anytime soon, that's for sure. This is a caterpillar that just doesn't believe it's ever going to turn into a beautiful butterfly. Like, I really feel as though this guy is a womanizer. He's also someone who is all in it for being supportive, helpful, to get his external validation kicks, and, is really just a raging hot mess when it comes to being able to provide for his family, no matter who he's with. I think he obviously can't handle real life. We've seen that with his inability to deal with his dad's death, his mum's fall. Like, he just can't handle it. And the panic attacks he's having are over the top. Let me make it very clear. If you are someone having a panic attack, I understand it's probably for a very understandable reason to your nervous system. But if you're having a panic attack where you're not able to cope with the rigors of life, to me, and this is going to sound harsh, so take what I'm about to say with a pinch of salt, but if you can't handle that, something inside of me thinks you obviously don't have a lot of emotional resilience to difficult things. And when you're middle-aged, that rings massive alarm bells to me, because then I start to think, well, obviously you have a low threshold for emotional distress. Yes, having family members go through difficult times, having stress at work, having lots of things go out of control is definitely appropriate stuff to cause a panic attack. I will not deny that. However, consistent with people who have a severe avoidant attachment style, who have poor emotional intelligence and are also very emotionally arrested in their development, it is not surprising that their anxiety reaches all new heights that would not be seen in other people. I understand Leanne works at a hospital. She's probably more accustomed and also not as, bothered by what goes on there. Totally get it. However, I feel like when it comes to just the realities of life, like your son having, exams, health related stuff, illness with COVID, like this is a guy who just, whenever there's a problem, he tries to run away from it because he can't handle it. And he's obviously very enmeshed, as I've said consistently throughout this. So yeah, Leanne, I am so sorry that you've gone through this shit show of a relationship. I do think there's more than just dismissive avoidant attachment going on here. I think he might have some other stuff too, but he's absolutely a DA with codependency, enmeshment, and, I think that he doesn't have a lot of depth to him at all. I do not deny the good times you had with him. I think he probably came in at a time when you were vulnerable and it would have been wonderful. But my God, like this is another great example of dismissive avoidance who appease, meaning they'll tell you things like, yeah, that's fine. It's okay if you're tired and don't want to spend time with my family. But then all that resentment, comes out like Mount Vesuvius, and you're Pompeii. You get completely blindsided because you never saw this coming. This is a guy who also has demonstrated extreme reactivity where whenever, obviously, you say no to him, he tends to, it seems like, have these explosive moments, or he suppresses his rage at you. And I imagine too that he's not very good at being able to regulate himself, hence why he's such a people pleaser. He's not a positive person though. A lot of people pleasers and mummy boys or, people like this, right? Tend to believe, I'm just a positive person, but they're actually not positive. They're actually they have a lot of vile thoughts and feelings that they're covering with a veneer of toxic positivity and childish immaturity and inappropriateness. And I do think this guy, kind of is, it just sounds like he's actually kind of a bit fake, at times. Like he probably doesn't actually show up authentically, which is showing how he's probably an emotional mess. His emotional system is probably a dumpster fire because of all of the crap that he's gone through. I understand. I'm sorry for him that he's gone through this, but his behavior is not okay. And he's committed abandonment against you and your son. Your son's already been abandoned by his birth father, and now he's got a second dad who's abandoned him too, for no apparent reason. Poor guy. Like, I understand why he's not accepting counseling and other stuff. He's probably just so overwhelmed being like, I don't know if I want to talk about it. I wouldn't be surprised if he's probably struggling at school with bullying and other stuff as well too, because a lot of us who've had, caregivers who haven't been around and to support us, we often feel tremendous low self-esteem, which does impact us in schooling systems because we don't feel good enough and we can't have that assertive energy, which can protect us from time to time against people who are bullies. Anyways, that's speculation aside. Thank you for sharing this with me. What a horror story. And for those of you that are listening, last letter reading is coming out this evening with me and my colleague Laura. And then I'm going to do some more readings in January. So yes, thank you very much for those of you that have listened. If you like this episode, please leave us a review because it helps to show that we're doing, well, hopefully we'll get good feedback because that shows that we're doing the right thing. And for those of you that celebrate it, Merry Christmas. Otherwise, happy holidays. And I look forward to seeing you all for the last letter reading of 2024.